All right, welcome on out. My name is Joseph Blackman, and I'm the founder of Vitendo Training Solutions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But right now, we are at the Waterjet Technology Association, and we're talking about tribal knowledge. So we're going to skip the escape room stuff for right now, but we're going to get into the presentation. All right, so an introduction to tribal knowledge. So I always like to use definitions for things. So let's start off with the definition of tribal knowledge. Tribal knowledge refers to the unwritten, informal, and often unstructured knowledge that is passed down within a specific group or organization through personal experiences, anecdotes, and shared practices. This knowledge is typically not documented, but is relied upon by members of the group to understand processes, procedures, and insights that are not formally documented or part of official training materials. So think about it. With that definition, does that ring true? Like, is there institutionalized knowledge or tribal knowledge within your department, within your city, within your company that isn't documented, stuff you just know that because you've been doing it for X amount of time? And wouldn't it be cool if there was a way to document all that, to pass it on to, let's say, the next generation coming in? All right, so who knows this guy on the right? So if you don't know, the guy on the right, his name is Drew Bledsoe. And you know, I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer. He might be, but he's really good. He was a really good quarterback. Like he did a lot of good stuff for the Patriots. But most of you guys know the guy on the left. Yep, Tom Brady. So Tom Brady is arguably the best football player ever. He's the GOAT. He's won a ton of Super Bowls and a ton of MVPs and just, I mean, he was the guy. I mean, he just retired a couple years ago, but he's the guy. So one thing about that transition between Drew Bledsoe and Tom Brady was that there was no noticeable drop-off. And I played college football, and one of the things the coaches used to always say was, you know, from the first string to the second string, no drop-off. Meaning, if the first string should be able to get an interception on a certain pass play, then so should the second string. If the first string should make the offense go 3 and out, then so should the second string. So there should be no noticeable drop-off in regards to production or output from the first string to the second string. So think about your departments, your company. If one guy's in vacation or on vacation in Maui, was the guy who takes his spot, will he produce less widgets, or will he be less safe, or will something bad happen that would happen to the first guy? So how can we think of when Drew Bledsoe goes down, when your main guy retires or he goes on vacation, will the next guy in line, will he be ready to rock and roll to fill his shoes to where there is no noticeable drop off of production or output? So this right here is the depth chart. Most of you know who all works for your company, what everybody does for the company, kind of who's next in line or in stuff for certain positions, but it's always good to come up with the depth chart. So, I mean, again, in football, we live by the depth chart. Like every spring, every fall, you would know where you're at on the depth chart, whether you're first string, second string, third string. You know where you're at on special teams, whether it's first string, second string, third string. Let's say I might be a second string safety, but I'm first string on punt return, second string on kick return, first string on kickoff. So you know exactly where you where you're at all times on the depth chart. Again, depth charts are posted pretty much everywhere. They don't make it hard to find because they want everybody to know where you stand and where you're at in regards to the depth chart. So this right here, I printed it off, or I put it on the screen. This is Georgia's depth chart. So again, these guys you'll see on the field, and some guys like the defensive linemen, they'll rotate them in and out just to keep fresh legs out there. But like, let's say this middle linebacker, Jay Johnson, if he goes down, then this R. Davis kid needs to be ready to rock and roll. So think about some of your methods and procedures. If somebody goes down, who's next in line? Come up with the depth chart. Like, show the guys, okay, if such and such is on for vacation, who's going to hop in and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do next, or who I'm going to take the next snap at this. Assessing your current workforce. That's part of doing the depth chart. So I'm a huge fan of war history. I'm not sure if anybody else is, but I always like the part in movies where you see the generals and they're standing around this table and they got these figurines on the table and they're moving them around and kind of just displaying that here's what potentially the enemy could do, and here's what we could do to combat the enemy better. Here's the position we can put ourselves in to best perform. So like, should I put 200 tanks on this side of the battle? Should I put some airstrikes on this? Should I put some infantrymen on this side? What if these infantrymen need food and these guys don't need food? How can we get them, like the logistics behind it? So kind of just knowing the who, what, where, when for everybody that's a part of your team and where they're at. Like most of you guys do like a morning rodeo or like a little powwow before you send everybody out in the field. So think about your strategy for the next 3 months, for the next 3 years. Like, well, how are you going to deploy your infantry or your tanks or your jets to know that you will win the war in 3 years from now? Most in NFL, like it's funny, Aaron Rodgers, he went to the New York Jets, right? And it was kind of weird because he had a wish list, and think about it, like a wish list. Like, so I'm the new quarterback of your team, and here's what I want, to have your, to succeed at that position. Well, it kind of makes sense, but think if, on the other end, it's like, dude, who are you to have a wish list? But what he was saying was, I need certain parts and pieces to succeed in this position. And most general managers, they do have a wish list. Like, man, we need a strong left tackle because if Aaron Rodgers, always has to worry about getting sacked all the time, he's not going to be able to perform to his full potential. So figure out, what your wish list is, what kind, and not just what players, but what kind of players. Do you have more guys who are, more just keep their head down and want to work? Do you have more too many energy guys who just want to, talk and party and have fun and don't necessarily want to do the work? Do you want to have a balance of that? Do you need more women around? Do you need somebody to kind of lighten the mood? So think about what personalities or what types of guys you might want to bring into your organization to succeed. All right, so accessing your current workforce. So these are the 4 different generations that are around right now that make sense right now. So baby boomers, 57 to 75 years old. Gen X, 41 to 56 years old. Millennials, 25 to 40 years old. Gen Z, 6 years old to 24 years old. So think about your breakdown. You probably have a decent amount of Gen X's. You probably have a couple baby boomers, and you probably have some millennials in some meaningful positions. And Gen Z, you might have a couple Gen Zers around. But think about, in this, I'm not sure if you can read it, but there's different values that each one has. And I kind of call BS on this because I think a lot of us, we do have the same values. We want to make money, we want to get home safe to our family, and we want to feel like we do meaningful work. We want to know that what we do matters and that people care about what we do. But for the baby boomers, the values are motivated by position and prestige. Strong work ethic, wants stability. Yeah, makes sense. Gen Xers, these are 41 to 56 years old. Self-sufficient, resourceful, values freedom. I think that's everybody. But millennials, 25 to 40 years old. Self-confidence, values flexibility, work-life balance is important. That is true. And Gen Zers, tolerant of others, risk-averse, less trusting of authority. I think that does ring true. But I think, again, across the board, all of those different values could represent the greater whole of everybody. And so think about who you have in your team and like how to motivate them. Are some people carrot people? Do you have to motivate them and say, hey man, if you really do this, you're going to get a bonus. Or if you show up on time for X amount of days, and you'll be able to be up for promotion for this position. Or should you say, hey, like you keep showing up late, we're going to start cutting the heads around here, and you're the weed that's popping up the most. So is a guy a stick guy or is a guy a carrot guy? How do you motivate them? If a Gen Xer, if they value freedom, say, hey man, like, would you rather have less money and more time off? Like, do you want to work 4 10s? Or do you want to work, 6 days a week, working, 5 hours a day or something different to where they can make that choice of, okay, if I want more freedom, I want to work less and make less, that's okay, versus the 40-hour work week, you get paid the same as everybody else. I think you'll be surprised a lot of people would opt in for working, making a different amount of money if they can work less or more. Some people want to ramp it up during the holidays. I get it. You want to pick up overtime for the Christmas and all that. And some people in the summer, you want to scale it back because you're doing vacations. You want to spend more time with the family. You got kids sports and stuff. So think about what might motivate different people within your organization. All right, creating a succession planning team. So we all know that everybody's here to retire. I mean, nobody's going to get out of this thing alive, life alive. Of course, our companies and stuff, but we're not going to get out of this thing without having to retire. Most of us are going to leave. So who's going to be next in line? And then also put a team together. A lot of you guys might know, so Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, he took over the Colorado Buffalo job, and he pretty much cleaned house. I mean, he brought in everybody who he thought, would help him out get to where he needs to be. Season is probably not as good as they want it to go, but he's doing his thing. He's having fun with it, and he brought in his own coaching staff. And what that means is he's like, hey, these are the guys that I trust to run the show when I'm not around. Meaning if there's a position group like the punters, that he brought in a special teams guy that he thinks can manage the punters and kickers without him having to be over the punters and kickers. Do you have a team, or are you the main person who's pretty much running the show, and nobody can get anything done without your approval? We've all been in companies like that. It doesn't make sense to do that. Or should you find the best people? I mean, I read a book and it said, if you can find somebody 75% as good as you in doing the tasks that you do, delegate it. Get it off your desk, because you need to be working on the higher level tasks. You need to be working on the business instead of in the business. Like figuring out, the strategy and the look aheads versus the in it moment by moment, minute by minute. Don't do it alone. Don't think you're ever alone in this. Again, if somebody's 75% as good as you is doing that task, delegate it, because you'd be surprised when somebody gets delegated a task that they know is a little bit above their weight class, they're punching above their weight class, it empowers them. It makes them want to do more. It makes them want to show up for the company. It makes them like, their job, because they feel valued and they feel like they're taking on bigger tasks. All right, so this is a picture of the combine. The combine is always weird to me, because it kind of feels like a cattle call. They're looking at a whole bunch of guys and they're wearing skin-tight outfits and they're just kind of examining you and putting you through a whole bunch of tests. And think about how good Tom Brady did at the combine. I mean, he was slow. He couldn't lift any weights. He didn't really show well with pictures and videos, but he's the best ever. So does a combine, does a test for XYZ amount of space between the thumb and the pinky, does that really matter? Or is that just something they use to, just to justify their position? So think about what you can do when you bring in talent to know if you're going to bring in the right guy or not. Think about the guys that you like, or the guys who work for you and work well. Like, do they a lot of companies say, hey, do you have any friends? Like, do you know people that you think would come in and do good work like you do? Or was it like a career fair? Did you poach somebody from a competitor's company? So think about what process you went through to get that A+ talent, and then repeat it, duplicate it. I mean, you'll probably get similar results if you continue to duplicate those tasks. So people have SOPs for pretty much everything out there, but if you have an SOP for talent, then that will also, systemize everything you got going on. So does anybody know this guy right here? Most people don't know. This is Wilfredo Pareto. He is the author of the 80-20 law. So think about, 80% of your headaches probably come from 20% of your people. 80% of your problems probably come from 20% of your customers. 20% of your actions probably yield 80% of your revenue producing results. And just most other things, like 80% of the arguments with my wife are probably stem from food, which is 20% of our day. So if you think about it, there's a 20% that yields 80%. And that usually comes from, it's a small switch that you flip, or a small lever that you pull that yields wider results. So think of that lever, that leverage that you can use to be able to develop a succession plan that does yield wider results. All right, so who all knows this guy right here? So this is Mike Singletary. He was a coach, and I forgot what years, but he was a coach for the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm from the Bay Area. At the time, I was living in the Bay Area. And everybody wanted Mike to do so well because we loved him as a player. We loved his attitude, loved his intensity. But, I mean, his time coaching, it was a dumpster fire. Like, it was pretty bad. I mean, I think they won some games and they made a couple, some noise, but it didn't go down how we wanted it to go down. Mike's the kind of guy that a lot of manly men can get behind, and we like that in football. but that generation of players he couldn't connect with. So think about certain generations that maybe you have training the newer generation, or a certain way of doing things around the office that might not resonate with the new guys coming in. Again, you can have a great operator, great manufacturer, great widget producer, or XYZ getter doner, but he might not be the best person to train the new generation. I mean, how many of you seen it before where you just take the best operator and make him a manager or supervisor? It's like, okay, just because he's been there and he's good at doing what he's doing doesn't mean he should be in the position to manage. Usually that's a different skill set. Like, I would hate to be coached by Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan is so good at basketball. He put his 20, 30, 40,000 hours in at basketball. There's so much nuance that is missed if he says, hey, Joseph, I need you to just work, go work on going to the right and shooting the basketball. So that's why I say, like, there's so much nuance missed, and take that on and figure out how to figure out that nuance to get that across to the new generation. Does anybody know I'm doing the video, so does anybody know these logos right here? If not, that's okay. These are AAA, AA, single A logos for baseball. So if you probably know the Texas Rangers and the Arizona Diamondbacks are in the World Series right now, but these guys are with the developmental league. So a lot of teams, they put their players in this developmental league to be able to develop themselves. They might not have a space for them on the official roster, but they can develop them and bring them into it. So think about within your company how you can hire a guy, bring him on, put him in your developmental league, and then train him up, and then so he can be ready for that new position. Think about certain tasks that he might be able to go and do to kind of keep his energy about him. Because when you don't give somebody a task to do, they get stale. Like, think about a body of water that just sits. It gets stale, it festers. But you think of a river, like, you can drink from it. It's clear, it's clean. So keep the guy in motion, keep him doing what he's doing, keep him doing something until he's ready for that bigger task. Sometimes it's better to take a A player and not put him on the bench on a higher team, but make him start on a lower position or on a lower level so he can continue to get his reps, continue to keep his confidence, and then keep rocking and rolling from there. So where's your minor league concept within your company? Think about that. Any sailors in here? All right, if you're not a sailor, this is, I guess, a term called tacking. And what tacking is, you go side to side, or you go a little bit, you look up, say, hey, am I going in the right direction? Yes, no. If no, you course correct, and then you go a little bit more, you look up, and you go, hey, am I going in the right direction? You go a little bit more, you look up. So think about, the intervals in your year. It could be quarterly, it could be monthly, it could be weekly, but lift your head up, or put your head down, close that office door, and figure out, hey, am I going in the right direction or not? Like, how many times have we just went through the whole year? It's like, man, that was a blur. Did I actually get closer to my goals and targets, or did I just keep putting out fires, right? Most of us are, firefighters and not actually, people putting together something that at the end of the year you can look back and go, man, we made it this far. So tacking, think about how you can implement a systemic or a systematic way to look up and go, am I going in the right direction or not? All right, evaluating succession planning effectiveness. You got to figure out if it's working or not. There's KPIs, there's things that you can look at to say, hey, am I going in the right direction? Am I doing this right? Is it safety? Is it revenue build out? Is it, how many guys you hired on that are still with you after their probationary period? So there's different KPIs to know that if, that tribal knowledge isn't getting passed on, you can figure out how you can turn that needle to go, oh, okay, I'm going in the right direction, or we're actually getting somewhere better than where we were last year. And then how do we get here? I mean, most of us, we're at a conference now, so most of us rolled out of our bed from the hotel, came downstairs, and boom, we're here. But all the people that drove, you probably had to get on the freeway, you had to get off the freeway, you had to get on the street, you had to go down a one-way, you had to come around here, you hit your Starbucks, you got your coffee, and then you came here. So like, everybody gets to a certain destination, but you have to figure out how you actually got here. So think back, reverse engineer it, rip it apart, Figure out where you came from to get to where you're at. And if you like where you're at, then repeat it. That's how you get that done. Feedback is always tough because you never know if you're going to get solid feedback from an anonymous survey, but it's usually a good way to know if you're going in the right direction if you ask. Like if you're letting somebody go, or they quit, or they're retiring, please do an exit interview. That's something that a lot of us don't do. It's because I get it. You're putting out fires. You're busy. You don't really have time to stop and interview a guy who's leaving your company. But usually there's one or two things you can take from that exit interview to implement it in something that's coming down the pipeline in the future. Chew the meat, spit out the bones. Don't think everything you're going to get from it is going to be positive, and that's okay. But we like to have tough conversations because, tough conversations actually get things done. So chew the meat, spit out the bones, figure out what guys are saying, if it actually makes sense or not, and then, objectively look at it and see if it makes sense. One thing I'm big on is getting 1% better every day. Again, always look to optimize, always look to find those little levers you can pull throughout the day to get a little bit better. Whether it's, you start off your day, you got a to-do list, you write everything down, you work your list through the day, or you start off your day with a 5-minute, meditation session, or you have your guys go outside and do some jumping jacks and toe touches just to kind of get the blood flowing. And you'd be surprised like what those little things can do to help out the course of the day, because if you do those every day, they start to compound over the year. And we all know that if you do, like they call it the healthy user bias. They say an apple a day does what? Well, yeah, it does keep the doctor away, but the healthy user bias really means that you're the type of person that will do something positive for yourself or something beneficial for yourself, for your future, consistently, and that keeps the doctor away. So think about what you can do every day to keep getting 1% better. All right, well, that's all. Thank you for coming out to the presentation. If you want to learn more about Vitendo, feel free to scan that QR code and go ahead and sign up for a 20-minute demo, and we'll take it from there. All right, thanks to everybody for coming out.